A few weeks ago, I prepared and placed on YouTube a video entitled 10 Steps to Social Security Disability Approval. Now I'd like to do part 2 of that particular video with some specific references to regulations that will help you achieve your approval. Just by way of a quick summary and a reminder of what we talked about before, we talked about basically the 3 ways to be approved for Social Security disability. One being to meet a listing. Those are definitions that doctors have written up for Social Security Administration over the years. Number 2 would be to a grid. That's, well, technically they call them medical vocational guidelines, but frequently referred to as grid rules. And those typically apply only to people that are age 50 or older. And then number 3 would be to have a finding by an administrative law judge or a decision maker at Social Security Administration that you have a residual functional capacity, abbreviated typically by Social Security as RFC, of less than sedentary. And remember, sedentary is what you would normally think of as what you might lift in a typical office setting. Not much, typically less than 10 pounds. Papers, documents, things of that sort, but not a great deal of weight involved. And so we kind of concluded that many people are going to have to follow that path of finding their approval by way of a residual functional capacity of less than sedentary. And I have picked out a few regulations that I want to share with you and give you reference to that I think will greatly strengthen your case and your claim. The first of those is what Social Security calls Social Security ruling. And of course the rulings, like all things government, there are abbreviations, simply SSR for Social Security ruling. The applicable Social Security ruling is 96-9P, SSR 96-9P. That is the regulation, the ruling that provides guidance to decision makers at the Social Security Administration as to how to make a finding of a residual functional capacity of less than sedentary, which again leads to what we're looking for, hallelujah, the approval for you. And by the way, any of the rulings or regulations that I reference, you can also find the complete ruling or regulation via a simple Google search. So if you want more information, simply do that. Easy to find. But with regard to SSR 96-9P, which is really critical to what we're talking about to find a path for you for approval, it's important to recognize, and I'm going to quote from this, for example, with regard to stooping, and also we'll talk just a little bit in a moment about the requirement for good use of both hands. But with regard to stooping, very, very important to your approval. And I'm going to quote, "A complete inability to stoop would significantly erode the unskilled sedentary occupational base, and a finding that the individual is disabled would usually apply." Think about that. Remember it. Write it down. Critical to your approval. Now, once we've said that, we have to look at the specific definition of stooping, because that's what's often overlooked in hearings or other discussions related to your approval. And again, I'm going to quote this because it is critical to your approval. Stooping is defined as bending the body downward and forward by bending the spine at the waist, requiring, and here are the key phrases, full use of the lower extremities and back muscles. Write that down, please. Full use of the lower extremities and back muscles. So it's not either or, it's both. You must have both in order to be able to stoop. And many people are not able to stoop because they have limitations with regard to their spine. They have back pain, they have bulging discs, they have, as you know better than I do, many problems that are related to spine and back pain and related problems. Therefore, it's relatively reasonable to make an argument that you are unable to meet that definition of stooping that I just read to you. And by the way, that you can find that definition by doing a Google search with regard to, and this is one of the references that Social Security Administration utilizes. It's called the Revised Handbook for Analyzing Jobs, and I'm looking specifically at pages 12 through -5, 12-5, with regard to the definition of stooping. But not to go on and on about stooping, but if you're not able to stoop, and other people are not able to stoop because they have perhaps vertigo or dizziness, but I know from my own experience that many of my clients have problems with their back and spine, and that prevents the what's required in the definition. And I'm going to repeat it again for emphasis: the full use of lower extremities and back muscles. Write that phrase down. It's the key to your pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. And again, by the way, once you see the via your Google search the Revised Handbook for Analyzing Jobs, you'll also see many related definitions. For example, and these are often discussed at hearings in particular, reaching, handling, fingering, things of that sort. And those are defined, and those definitions that are often just kind of skimmed over in hearings and other parts of the adjudicatory process are really the essence and what's really critical to your approval. Just so you have another point of reference, each year the Social Security Administration publishes what they call the waterfall chart. Waterfall chart looks like this, a little bit like a waterfall, but at any rate, you can Google that as well. But the essence of that is that at the initial level, about 37% of claims are approved. At the reconsideration level, 13%, I should say, only 13% are approved. As a matter of fact, a number of states, last count I believe is 11, have eliminated the reconsideration because, as a practical matter, it's really essentially a rubber stamp of the initial denial. And so it's, don't be too concerned about being denied at either the initial level or the reconsideration level, because as you can see statistically, most claims are going to have to go to hearing before an administrative law judge. Right now, in the past, the most recent statistics, 45% of claims were approved by administrative law judges. So you got round numbers, you get a 50-50 chance. But if you have information and you have good representation and advocacy, you greatly improve those chances for approval. As a matter of fact, Social Security Administration's and the General Accounting Office have done studies and find that folks who are represented are 3 times more likely to be approved than those who are not represented. I'm not necessarily giving a sales pitch on that, but those are the facts speak for themselves. Then if your claim ends up going to the Appeals Council, the numbers really work against you, because at the Appeals Council only approves 1% of claims at that level, but does remand 11%. And what's a remand? A remand is simply Social Security Administration's way of saying we're going to send this claim back to the administrative law judge for a second hearing because we think they made some mistakes. They didn't fully follow our regulations or some other technical violation, or simply based on the merits of the claim, didn't properly consider it. And here's another reference that you can Google. It's called SSR, Social Security Ruling 13-2P. I had to lean over to read that. But what it really says is that, and I'm going to not read the entire thing, but it says we require adjudicators at all levels of administrative review. In other words, the initial claim, the reconsideration, the hearing, throughout the entire process. We require adjudicators at all levels, as set out in the Commissioner's regulations, to follow these regulations. So the definitions that I've read with regard to stooping, the regulations encompassed in SSR 96-9P, they're not optional. They're required by regulation for the administrative law judges and other decision makers to follow those regulations. But now jumping back, if you will, for the other critical element of a finding of an RFC, residual functional capacity, that's less than sedentary, which is what we're looking for, which is the goal, the objective, your approval. And I'm going to read this as well. It says, and I'm quoting, most unskilled sedentary jobs require good use of both hands and the fingers, i.e. bilateral manual dexterity. And continuing with my quote, any significant manipulative limitation of an individual's ability to handle and work with small objects with both hands will result in a significant erosion of the unskilled sedentary occupational base. In other words, that's kind of a fancy, long-winded way of saying that the two really key requirements of being found to have a residual functional capacity of less than sedentary require both the ability to stoop and require good use of both hands. And so absent that, a very strong argument should be made that you should have a finding of a residual functional capacity, RFC, of less than sedentary, and therefore disabled and placed into pay status and eligible to receive your monthly benefits. I don't want to belabor the point, but because I want to keep this short, because I know folks don't like to watch lengthy discussions on YouTube or any other media. But in summary, SSR 96-9P requires the ability to stoop, as I've defined for you, and requires good use of both hands. And absent that, you should find yourself on a path to approval if that information has been properly and fully articulated to the decision makers at the Social Security Administration. With that, I will thank you for watching. I will stop. I will ask you to subscribe if you're inclined to do so. I'll ask you for any comments that you may have, and appreciate you taking the time to view this video. The best way to reach me is by email at HermannAdvantage@gmail.com, Hermann being HermannAdvantage @gmail.com, HermannAdvantage@gmail.com. I wish you the very best in your pursuit of disability benefits, and let me know if I can provide information or insights for you, or otherwise be of assistance.